David Osiany, who is a former Chief Administrative Secretary. David, good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to the hot seat of the Situation Room.
It's nice to be here. Not so hot after all. Don't make it. Don't burn it.
No. That's not the intention at all.
It's nice to see you all
Nice
again.
to see you as well.
Yeah, the last time I was here, Eric wasn't around, so I was at City and Ndu.
Yeah. And the previous time that you were meant to be here was here. And then you didn't come.
I mean,
But now he's here
fate
today.
would have it.
Today, yeah. So indeed. So we are draw.
Gladly and happily.
Welcome, David.
Thank you.
That proverb. Do you relate?
Yeah, chance all, see what gets out of it. Yeah, I'm a believer in cast your bread upon many waters. You know, the biblical verse. And it's a good thing. Sometimes you keep all your eggs in one basket, and then the basket drops and all the eggs are broken. So chance all. Try this one. Say, that's not where my passion is. Chance, yeah.
Put it here and
Diversify
there. Yes.
your chances and your interests and investments. Chance all.
Okay.
In fact, Eric, this county has they chanced it.
They're
didn't they?
chancing it.
This one's good.
They're investing in all their children.
Yes, sir.
One of them.
And then look at what destiny brought.
Yeah.
David, you served as a Chief Administrative Secretary
Yes.
in the previous administration.
Yeah.
The first one that was the first CASs.
Yes.
Okay, the issues of the legalities are notwithstanding.
Yes.
But you served
Yes.
in public service.
Very legal. We were just guided by the courts, Eric.
Yeah?
You see, what people have refused to do is to just read the ruling. The ruling gave the president a caveat to leave us in office. This was the ruling. Whereas the officers have not been constituted correctly, which means there needed to have been interviews to substantively fill those offices. We advise the president that the status quo shall remain until we have dealt with the menace of COVID.
Yeah.
Now, you know that left it open-ended. So as we just waited
There's
for the
still
day the
COVID.
president said, COVID imeisha na nyinyi muende nyumbani. But yes, we it was an honor to serve, nonetheless.
Was it your first time serving in government?
When I left the university, I worked with the Prime Minister as a special advisor on youth affairs in his office. But that was not mainstream government because it was part private, though I sat at the office of the Prime Minister and I wasn't paid by government.
Okay.
Before I then transitioned. So it was substantively my first time to serve. But previously I had been appointed as the vice chair of the board for Chemelil Sugar Company. Again, the privatization issues began and all the boards for sugar companies were revoked. So yes.
So this one is the first one that came with the money, the power, the office. You walked into an office and then there's a
Much more
PA.
the opportunity,
There's-
opportunity for impact.
There's
but
secretary,
yes, yeah,
right?
those the trappings. I mean, they all come with the responsibility. So they are to ensure that you can avail service as others see it. I refuse to get addicted to them. So, but yes, it was the first time when I served at that level with all those trappings. And yeah.
As you look back on those 5 years, 4 years, what do you think? What would you say you achieved? That
Actually-
Kenyan can look back and say, actually, you know what? Because he was there, 1, 2, 3 things, came about, and we are better for it.
Interestingly, I served for only 1.5 years, but I was so impactful.
I mean, I'm looking at the administration of 5 years.
It's easy. I wouldn't say much about what happened before I was there. However, what I necessitated was to ensure that we get knowledge out. See, I get into government and I see all these good policies, all these wonderful things that are going on. And I'm thinking to myself, who speaks about what is going on here? Information needed by businesses. Now, I made the SME my space for impact very intentionally, because the SMEs are starting up, they need every little ounce of support for them to be able to make it, to grow from the nano to the micro, micro to the small, small into medium, and medium into large enterprises. And so I started, I guess my background in radio was helpful and my love for communication. So we started the Biashara Tuesdays conversations every day, 11 to midday. I had a live Facebook page program where I'd invite our CEOs, all of them, Kenya Bureau of Standards, Micro and Small Enterprise Authority, Kenya Industrial Estates, Kenya Industrial Research Development Institute, Kenya Industrial Property Institute, each one of them on different days, all the 20 of them. And I wanted them to explain what it is that they had for the SME space, or the information that the people didn't have out here. Now, if you want to know how much government may not really treasure comms, the first measure that the president got into office, the circular that was released, was 75% budget for comms is cut by government. It's not a necessity sometimes for them, but it's a very important tool for any government to be able to inform its citizenry about the initiatives they had. And for me, looking back, besides my engagement with the creation or the launch of the SME policy, besides just ensuring that we had a more accountable system, the Biashara Tuesday is my greatest take home. It was the most impactful thing for me.
How do you measure that impact?
I measure the impact by the number of engagements and the number of people who then come back and say, by the way, you said that as a youth below 35, if you go to KIPI, Kenya Industrial Property Institute, then your trademarks are going to be registered for free. Now, that's information people didn't know. If 10 people are going to come back and say, I went, then I'm happy.
Sure.
If we have numbers of people going to Kirdi, the Kirdi in Kisumu and Bungoma and Nairobi, during my stint, and it's proven, received the hugest traffic to their centers, because I kept hyping it, not only on Biashara Tuesday, but every other opportunity I had. Hey guys,
What is Kirdi?
Kirdi is the Kenya Industrial Research Development Institute. It is the institution mandated to help SMEs that want to get into value addition. So for example, in Kisumu, I had this young lady who is making perfumes. So we brought together the 3 Ks, KIE, Kenya Industrial Estates, which funds SMEs in the manufacturing space. We have Kirdi that helps with research and guides them to create content and products that meet the market standards. Then you had the Kenya Bureau of Standards to ensure that once they've been helped by Kirdi, they are given the right standards. Now, the 3 of them worked together. This lady walked into our Kirdi branch in Kisumu to want to make perfumes. And Kirdi assisted this lady, because they are researchers, they are chemists, they are all this talent and a pool of talent by government. So she was guided, and now as I speak, her products are on the shelf. You want to hear about the owner of Modesh Bakeries again, who was just selling her, baking with charcoal, the charcoal oven. And moved to our Kirdi Center, was taught how to broaden her capacity. Right now, as I speak, Modesta, who's the owner of Modesh Bakeries, owns a baking school, has built her bakery, and has just grown wings.
Where did she get the capital?
KIE, Kenya Industrial Estates. So I said there is the triad. So once KIE sees that this is viable, what they do is they inject a bit of capital. You grow into it.
Yep.
There are young people that KIE has really boosted and supported in just the outskirts of Eldoret, who are starting milling. So they first borrowed 300,000. Within a space of 2 years, they'd gotten to the point they could borrow the limit, the highest limit, which is 20 million, to buy equipment. Now, if these stories are not told, the stories of impact, the stories of how government has literally impacted on young people,
Then nobody gets to know about them.
nobody gets to know about them.
So that's how you measure the impact that you had
Yeah, that's how I measure it.
in terms of the number of people, footfall
Into Kirdi,
and KIE and all these offices.
the people who took up the services, and the people who've been able to establish themselves. Yeah.
Did you set up a structure within the ministry that would perpetuate this after you left?
You see, I didn't even have a budget for it. So it is something that was dependent on me. These are the reasons I said there will be things that depend on the person. If
And
it's impossible
Did you identify
to create.
any person?
You know, when I got into government, Eric, first to even start Biashara Tuesday was a fight. Because this is not how things happen in government. All right, there's a method and procedure and processes. And I said, no, this is how it's going to happen here, because we don't have the budgets to go buy airtime on TV. And if we had the money, we would only buy a slot a day. And that's not sustainable. We want to run this for the 1 year, 1.5 years I'm here. So there was a general fear. And then government people just fear media. And I wonder, what is there to be feared so badly about media? So I had to change the culture. And the fear was also because, no. Am I going to be there and my PS has not been there? And I tell them, no, your PS is a rank below me, so it's me who has called you, come. But that's because this is the person they interface with.
Yeah.
It was a whole fight. Now, I ensured that I started a team of comms drawn from all the agencies put together, and I trust they are moving on well. I'm not too sure they've gotten the mouthpiece who would be able to speak for them, but I'm glad that my stint has had the impact of Moses Kuria. I saw he's now created the Biashara monthly update, which for me is a good attempt to give an overview of what the ministry is doing. Yeah, it's a good attempt.
When you mentioned that the budget for comms was cut, it means it exists. It's budgeted for
Yeah.
in all government ministries.
Yes.
What is it? What is it intended? What is its purpose? I mean, what's its purpose? What is it supposed to do?
Comms is broad, so it's from buying, space on traditional media to doing the IEC materials, information, education, and communication materials, to facilitating trainings around communication. It's quite diverse.
You know why I asked the question?
Yes.
It's because if somebody arrives at a decision to slash an amount from a budget that had already been passed, for the budget to exist, for the money to exist, it means it went through the process and they said, okay, have it.
That's not what government does. They don't consult you to slash the budget. They just say, this is it. We are constituting the Hustler Fund and we are not consulting you. Sasa, what we think doesn't merge with our intentions is this. Never mind. It's quite minimal. The budgets were ridiculously minimal for the function of communication.
Well, the government is big on following the constitution. At least that's the language the politicians in the government use. And one of the things that is utterly and absolutely important in any government endeavor, especially with regards to the citizenry, is what you call public participation. Does
Very
government
important.
practice this among themselves? I mean, within the ministries, are people asked, are your opinions sought when you're doing certain things and you're asked, what do you think is important? How should we do this? Or again, does government where government means somebody who's high up decide this is what's happening and your views don't really count?
Again, this will depend with the leader. There are leaders, like I was very lucky to work with Betty Maina. Betty Maina was very participatory. She is the lady who would bring us together. I think we are the only ministry that had a top-level management meeting every month. That was, the CS, the two of us who are the CASs and the two PSs running the two state departments. And every time I met my colleagues, they would say, uko kwenu is quite different. So you will find a leader like Betty Maina who just wants to seek opinions. Of course, the decision is hers to make. And then you will find others who just, it's their way or the highway. You see, nothing compels them They are mandated to drive and lead policy making. So the law envisages public participation before creation of some laws, not before making internal decisions. So if you have the good sense for leadership, I would imagine that that would be the right thing to do. But if you don't, no one's going to punish you. So
You got away with it.
I tell you.
People have talked about, and this is what you're saying. There's a lot that the government does, and there's a lot that people don't know, and yet they are the intended beneficiaries
Yeah.
of some of these initiatives.
Yeah.
They should be the consumers of these services.
True.
Right?
True.
With that stint of yours in government and being a communications practitioner,
Yeah.
how should the government, because it's not for want of government officers, communication officers.
Mm-hmm.
Each state department, each saga has a communications officer who's a permanent and pensionable employee of government. So it's not for want of that. So how should government restructure its communication to better serve the citizen?
I think it will all rest on how serious the communication officers are handled by the leadership of different ministries, state departments, and agencies. They should not come as the, at the tail end, You go to science-focused and science-based organizations like Kirdi. You tell them communications, they just laugh. What do you mean? You want to make noise for us here? What research? For them, it's about research and research. But you see, that research and the product of that research is utterly meaningless if it cannot be communicated to enhance different aspects of that research, whether it's entrepreneurship or customer and consumption patterns and behaviors. So I look forward to coordination of our PROs, given a bit more, centralized in their role. And then the coordination of the PROs is a bit unclear. So
It's haphazard. Huh?
So to whom do they report? Because they are seconded from the Ministry of ICT
Yep.
to the ministries, for example,
Yep.
which means they report to ICT. Just as happens with the accountants and the HR officers.
Yep.
So, but because they are not the accountants' money, HR officers, human resource, they're like, "Nyinyi ni kina nani?" They end up struggling. So, if we value them a bit
they're
more,
viewed as outsiders. So you're
Yes.
these guys who've come from Telposta Towers. Come and bring us.
yeah. So, but they too must demonstrate capability, their value, and excellence. It is one thing, because when you demonstrate it, everyone's going to want to be with you. When you write a speech for the CS and guide the CS, and you sit down and innovate around communication and seek the help of the CEO or the PS, I guarantee you, they'll find you an asset and they'll treat you as such. That's what we had in, the Feni Mwakio, who I worked with, or Olem. That's what we had at the ministry. It was much easier because they too were very good.
The other challenge is, it's not only in government.
Yeah.
Communication in all aspects is usually treated like, at the tail end.
I know.
You're developing policy, you're developing a program,
Yeah.
you deal with it, and then at that point, now we
How
need to
are we going
communicate it.
Yes.
Now, if you didn't factor in communication
You're
in
stuck.
the wiring of this, then it becomes difficult to implement it.
Good.
How does this change in government?
I learned everything changes from the top in government. Forget this whole notion. It can start somewhere in the middle and transform. No. You want real change? It starts at the top. The bottom can do amazing things. Without corresponding effort from the top, it's a lost cause. It won't. So the change will start at the top. The top must say communication is a key part. And I mean the presidency must say communication is a key part of my government. How do we explain that there is a global recession at the moment and it impacts on us? If you don't, we are going to pelt you with stones and say, "Wewe unatubeba." How do you explain that the oil exporting countries have cut down their export by 2 million barrels a day, and that whether we love it or we don't, the cost of fuel is going to go high? How do we explain how we are handling drought? How do we let the citizenry know that we have ensured that 8,000 people did not die in Turkana? How? How do we tell them with clarity? How does the Ministry of Agriculture explain its mandate? How does trade explain what it's doing for SMEs? That we started Biashara centers across the country and hope to replicate it. What has it achieved? You don't tell it. We tell the story. The citizens, you don't give them your story. They create theirs. And before yours catches up with theirs, you're gone.
You're out.
You're out.
It's 9:30. Let's take a break. David Osiany is the founder, owner, CEO. What else are you? Crestwood Marketing and Communications. It's a communication consultancy.
Yeah.
He's here to tell us the experience that he had in the 1.5 years or so working in government as Assistant Minister for Trade, Chief Administrative Secretary.
Kabisa.
Some fancy name. Okay.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Professional former CAS. You also served in your student days as the leader of the University of Nairobi Student Union.
Yeah.
And in those days, the Vice Chancellor was Professor George Magoha.
Professor George Albert Omore Magoha, son of Magoha, as he introduced himself. a great man. Professor Magoha was firm, focused. He loved and cherished honesty. He was cut from a different cloth. The man was brilliant. Professor Magoha never did his doctorate. His master's thesis was so good that it was considered as a doctoral thesis. And from there, earned his doctorate and grew to become professor. Professor Magoha was 2 cups of brilliance, 2 cups of forthrightness, 2 cups of professionalism, and a serving spoon of arrogance. He just spoke. He just loved it. And he wasn't shy. If he believed in it, he did it and said it. You remember when he was being interviewed by the MP, he said, listen, if you want to give me a job because I'm a Luo, I'm not the right person for this job. You give me the job because you know I'm an educator. You give me this job because you know I am capable. I have demonstrated excellence. I've demonstrated integrity, professionalism in my previous stint. As I have said, impact immortalizes a man. Professor Magoha was very impactful.
How did you interact and engage as the leader of the university students and him as the boss of the institution?
Of course, being the president of the Students' Union then meant that I served in the apex organization that ran the University Council. And so we had meetings from time to time with him. We had a few run-ins, some very good, some very bad. Some I abhor, others I adore. There's a time, for example, we went to him and said, Professor, we do not have beds, and if we don't get beds enough for the first years coming in, we are going to the streets. He said, so if you go to the streets, you will get the beds, or what will happen? And it was a way of exerting pressure. Of course, I wasn't the confrontational leader, hasn't been my style. So if we could get an amicable solution, of course, we later spoke, and within 24 hours, he had ordered for beds from God knows where, and there was sufficient beds in the campus. You know, and when you're the president of the union, the students are always nudging, wait, when the strike? When the town? And I wasn't very famous for not heeding the call of the students to the town. And my reasoning was, we get into town, we're going to disrupt business, destroy vehicles, bring a standstill, and who knows, it may be your uncle dying in an ambulance that is stuck as we are busy down there, and yet we already have the solution that we want. So sometimes we needed to exert pressure, but also to be conscious about what happens. And we had a great time. Magoha was a huge influence. I tell people every day, I wear my pocket squares. And my pocket squares were an influence, an obvious influence from George Albert Omore Magoha, son of Magoha. And he was a great man. He was a mobilizer. Magoha started the building of the university tower. There was no money, government was not giving him resources, and he just started fundraising. And he would go to people, went to Vijo Ratansi, who was the chancellor then, and said, Vijo, you run the Ratansi Education Trust. I trust you have some money. Why don't you do 2 floors and they'll be named in your honor? Went to Chandaria and said, Manu, you're a friend of the University of Nairobi. How about you donated by doing 2 floors? And then, and complemented it with the internally generated revenue. And the university tower stands there. And I want to ask, very honorably, the current Vice Chancellor, Professor Kiama, who himself is a protege of Professor Magoha, because Magoha was the first to appoint him to lead the Wangai Maathai Institute. Professor Kiama, do Professor Magoha one honor. Just name that university tower after this great man who built it from scratch, who had the vision for it, who solved the problem of student classes by just being visionary, utilizing the space upwards and across. Naming that in his honor would be a great one. That's how you immortalize a great man.
What do you think changed from, let's look at what he held most recently in government and what he was able to do. What do you think changed in the system before he took over the reins of the ministry until the time when he was leaving last year? What do you think changed?
So much changed. Again, Magoha was the guy who would focus on one thing and do it well. Having been appointed by Dr. Matiang'i, Fred, to head National Examinations Council as the chair, Magoha and Matiang'i went, and the duo just dealt with examination malpractices firmly. And that was Magoha for you. He didn't cut corners. It was his way or the highway, by the way. Magoha, once he knew it was right, he would not even consult. He'd just say, my friend, we are going here. And you stand in my way, I am going to crush you. Those were his exact words. That was a big thing, because I think the products of that system are going to be different. They will owe it to hard work. They will know and appreciate that my C+ was earned, not cooked. And in terms of just putting processes in place, he took a different kind of leadership to the Ministry of Education that had, apart from the stint of Matiang'i in the recent past, had just had easy, wheezy, chilly guys. And he just went there and he ruffled feathers. It was his style. Others called him arrogant. I call him forward. But I think in terms of policy, from CBC to ensuring that there was a very solid management system for our examinations, which is the root cause of professionalism. If you're going to have a great journalist ending up at, say, KIMC, the journalist must demonstrate their capabilities, for example, in lingo. And if you therefore steal and cheat in exam and end up with an A, you will end up at KIMC or at Daystar University, whichever institution. They will think you had it, but you also know you had it not. All right? Or you're going to end up with a clinician going to KMTC or a physicist ending up at the University of Nairobi, utterly incapable, because what is in their papers, which is the basis for gauging their capability, at least a semblance of their capability, because I also don't believe that those end of 4 or 8 years exams are the true depiction of our abilities. But it gives a semblance, if it's done right. It tells this is more an art student. This is more a math student. This is more a science student. And so we can try and get the most out of your talent based on that. So if you cheat in exams, That cannot be the case.
Again, coming now to communication. If you look at how the professor was doing things
Yes.
at the Ministry of Education, all right, rolling out CBC, so many questions up in the air being asked, this and the other. Time for transition. Everybody can see there's going to be a double intake next year. So what's going to happen? How are we going to handle it? Do you think the Ministry of Education actually handled that entire communication well on the transition to CBC, on the anticipated transition into junior secondary and phasing out of 844?
As a product of Magoha's forthrightness, I'll just say that communication was not handled well. It should have been handled better. They should have, they should have spent time communicate. They should have spent time communicating what CBC was all about, having the buy-in of the citizenry, because it was going to impact on the citizenry anyway. And that communication bit, but I wasn't entirely surprised. It was characteristic of the great paragon of excellence in Magoha. Once he believed in it, whether we communicate it or we don't, we are doing it.
Now, the unfortunate bit, in fact, that's what we were being told by Akello Misori the previous hour, is that he believed this way. His officers did not see his vision. And that's part of the reason why the transition into junior secondary has now just been reversed as well. Go back into, let it happen in primary schools. Because some of those officers that he left in office are the ones who are telling the new government, this thing, it's best if we have it in the primary schools. Yet so much resource and time and effort had been spent in preparing the grade 6s to go to secondary next year.
You know, I think...
So what does that say about...
I guess leaders should do a bit better into having the buy-in into their visions. I tell you, Magoha was a visionary leader. Take this to the bank, it will earn you interest. And if he intended for it, if we pursue, and if we could see, it's only that he probably couldn't let the others see. But if you followed keenly his vision, and if he had communicated it, at the end of that vision, there's something good. Now, we do not know it. It seems now not to look as great as he envisaged it to be. But be that as it may, no single man is perfect. We only strive for excellence, and Magoha was excellent. Not perfect. He fell far from perfect, like I am, like we all are. So maybe that was his imperfection, but it doesn't take away his excellence. Yeah.
In terms of percentage, from your interactions and experience in government, do you think what percentage of senior public and state officers are actually committed to the job?
Surprisingly, when I got into government, I met brilliant, dedicated, honest human beings, ladies and gentlemen, in the streets of government. I was shocked. I turned myself into more the student than the leader to learn as much as possible. I'd be asked, I'd ask them, so how long, sir, have you worked here? They'd say, I've worked here for 37 years. I would laugh and quip, okay.
All your life.
You started working when I was just being thought about before I was formed, You would find, I actually think that we have no short of 60% dedicated staff. 40% lackluster, still good. Then you have this 8 to 15% who are just tragic. Now the problem is if this 15 or 8 to 15% occupy the places that turn policy, then we are dead. We are cooked. But a majority of government officers, man.
That's why I asked you specifically at that senior level, at that decision-making level.
At the decision-making level, the dedicated, very honestly, I will give it 58.5% at the top.
So if they're not dedicated to the
There's a
cause, for which
15.5.
they've
That
been
is
there,
deputy directors, directors, the CEOs, the secretaries of
Yep.
different state departments, PSs,
everybody.
and ministers.
And
That is
ministers.
what I consider the top.
The decision
So
makers.
people are filling spaces for a job and not necessarily because they want to move the wheels of government to get jobs done.
Sometimes it's not, they are not intentionally stifling the movement of the wheels of government. Sometimes it's just people are comfortable, which is not something you'll find in the private sector. I run Crested, for example. You just know that I want results and the outputs are very clear. And, every quarter we are going to have appraisal. You didn't meet your targets, you show cause. You don't meet the targets again in the next quarter, a warning, second warning. We release you within a year.
What do you
So-
think is common about this 41.5% that you say not committed? Is it political appointment? Is it political godfather? Is it because there's something about that feeling of being comfortable, lack of accountability? What would cause that?
For some people, there's no challenge, so you just say, "Yeah, I'm the guy here. Mimi ndio wa kujua hapa." For others, it's just they're not patriots. You see, there's hii serikali imeletwa hapa, hauwezi nivuta. That's the thing. You can't
Umenikuta
fire
hapa.
me. Yeah, and they would tell you, tumeona wengi. We have seen ministers come and go.
Kijana.
Wacha pupa. Hey,
You'll still go.
yeah.
And we'll still
Kijana.
be here.
So I sometimes radically think, and I have proposed, I guess, on this show, that probably we need to have all government officers on 5-year contracts.
Non-renewable.
No, renewable. You can
Okay.
renew it 2 times or 3 times.
But
it's
not
fine.
automatically renewal.
But you're not P&P. Oh, man. Permanent and pensionable. They know you can't fire them. So even if they don't do much, they'll say, si utanipeleka tu department ingine. Ni sawa. Yet you find those who are dedicated. Man, I met dedicated public servants. From the police to the trade officers I engaged with. At all levels, senior, I met excellent, to drivers and messengers who just know their job well. I am probably the only minister, I dare say, who, as I exited office, wrote letters of commendation for women and men who I believed were excellent. And I penned letters to them, and I published on my Facebook page. I said, I am not the president, so I don't have the head of state commendation. I don't have the OGWs, MBS, EBSs. But I have an office with a title. I have a pen, and I have a heart of gratitude. And I reached down to even the drivers who I had noted were excellent. And there were about 45 people in my ministry I wrote to. Maybe not the only ones that were highly impactful, but the ones I interacted with that demonstrated patriotism, love for nation. They woke up to work every day to give the best, knowing so much and so many people in the country depended on their little action on their desks or at the sentry where the lady was a watchman, whatever it is. Yeah. I dare say I'm the only one. Oh, and by the way, 2 weeks ago, I could share messages. Some of my staff got together. I just saw M-Pesa. I didn't know who's sending this money. And when I called, they said, no. We are your staff. We have missed you. And we just put together something small. And they sent at least 200, 3,000, 1,000. And we've just said, wacha tukutumie tu kitu tukumbuke. I was honored. Public service has great men and women. But if the leaders could complement that, because leadership is everything.
That's it.
Period.
To make sure that they're getting the most out of these people.
Yeah.
And all these people need is the support because they're actually
Support.
already giving the most.
Yeah, and sets the tempo. I called a friend of mine, PS Festus Ngeno for Environment one evening, 8 p.m. Says, I'm in the office, bro, and I've been here from 7 a.m. And I bear testament to the many others at that level who just give it their all. People think all the big guys are busy chasing per diems all over the country, you know, and all over the out of the country. There are dedicated men and women out here who are doing everything they can to impact on policy and the future of the country.
I'm actually in agreement because as you were speaking, I was thinking, if they want such people, the sort of people you have described, then government services would have ground to a halt a long time ago.
That's true.
Yes.
True.
If the individuals whom we see who represent the worst that one could possibly imagine in government service were the ones with the majority, there really would be no government to speak of.
Completely.
Yes.
Completely.
It's the same with the police service. If indeed there are no dedicated
officers,
serving, then all we talk about security, man, there'd be complete mayhem.
Completely.
Yes.
If the few traffic officers who take a bribe even when no vehicle has a problem became our yardstick of measuring the capability and intention of our police service, I tell you, that would be the wrongest yardstick I have seen. I have interacted with officers who will not take no bribe, who just want justice. Then guys ask, gani wako? Nani wengi? Nani wengi? You know, you would go to a weighbridge. You will find officers who work for the National Highways Authority. Some will impound a truck, take all the money. Others will just say, you too know this is wrong. So to solve this, I don't want to punish you because ordinarily you should pay 300,000 shillings for being silly. But I'm giving you a warning, and we are putting this car of yours on check. You're going to reduce the amount that you have carried of sand or stones. Reduce it so that another truck can come for it. You know, just human. They understand that the truck owner is in business.
Yep.
The guy who's building is in business, but he too, he's in business. He's working for the country. And these people, as I always say, when we see them, when you go and find a nurse who is given to her service for country, when you encounter just but a watchman or watch lady, stop by and say, listen, I have observed you for a while. When you see a journalist who has done so much and they're dedicated finding new content every morning, it's not easy for you guys to find the right things to discuss for the country to hear, to add value to the country. You know, it's not easy. Stop by and say, hey,
I see you.
I see you and I honor you. When they're yet alive.
We should bring this guy more often, shouldn't we? So that he can say the things
This last thing that you said.
No. Because listen. I mean, I was a radio presenter, but when SpiceFM, especially this conversation, began, the uniqueness was absolutely just different. It is how it is well researched, and you ensure that nobody comes here without the right statistics. Nobody comes and lies or comes with half-truths and gets away with it. That is what journalism ought to be. It is a very important footstone for running the country. It is the accountability framework we have as a country, because sometimes they say we are not too sure what happens in the courts. So,
David, thank you very much for joining us, and wish you all the best as you now serve the private sector.
No, that's where I came from, and I'm happy to be there. You know, government.
We'll call you again to join our government.
Government can. Government can fool you sometimes, and so I'm delighted.
He is the CEO of Crested Marketing and Communications. He's a former Chief Administrative Secretary at the Ministry of Trade. We've been talking about his experiences in government, and yes, you've had very many good people serving us.